Hi, Edgewood 7th graders. Mr. Kinsick here. I know some of you are probably wondering, hey, this is not my social studies teacher, but I'm going to go through this PowerPoint presentation, or I guess a Google Slides presentation. Thought this might help fill in the gaps if you're absent, and just be some good things to look at. So I'm just going to kind of go through the details of Judaism, and I hope to do this for all the 5 religions we're going to talk about over the next couple of days. So feel free to look at this. I'm going to skip over some of these slides with the learning targets and just get right to the meat of the information. So, Judaism. One of the things I really want you to know about a lot of the religions we're going to talk about is there's an interconnectedness to them. And you're probably somewhat familiar with Christianity, and Judaism came before Christianity, and Christianity came out of it. Jesus, the central figure of Christianity, would have classified himself as a practicing Jewish person. So the holidays we're going to talk about here are things that he practiced. If you've heard of like the Last Supper, that was the Passover. So there's a lot of connections even between Islam and Christianity, or Islam and Judaism. So a lot of connectedness here. And that's one thing I want you to know. There are about 14 million Jews in the world today. And Jews, as you can see on this slide, is not really an offensive term if it's used as a noun to describe them. Most Jewish people are either in Israel, which is a fairly small country and an ally of the United States, or in the U.S. and Canada. So you can see it's pretty evenly divided between those two. But remember, Israel is a much smaller country than the U.S., so it's much more heavily concentrated in Israel than it is in the United States. Just to kind of as a side note for you, I have some relatives that live in New Jersey, and they are Jewish. So you might have even relatives of yourself that that you're connected to that are practicing Jewish people. There is a temple here in Bloomington, so it is around us. It began around 3,000 years ago with a guy named Abraham, and if that name sounds familiar, it's probably because it is in the Bible. Abraham is considered kind of like the father of the Jewish faith, I guess you could say, because he fathered many children, and all the descendants can kind of trace their way back to Abraham. So he is a central figure to kind of begin the story of Judaism. What else do we want to talk about here? There's some other important things. If you've heard of King David, he was a famous Jewish king. We might talk about him a little bit more in Christianity. His son Solomon built the temple. And the temple would later be destroyed. It's not in existence today. Jewish people do not have a building that they go to, like the super holy building from long ago. It was destroyed. They built it once, and then after, it was destroyed a second time, and they never built that. And what stands in Jerusalem, which is in Israel, is the Wailing Wall. And it's one wall of the temple, and people gather there and really treat it like a holy place and worship there. But the temple was officially destroyed many years ago. Just a lot more about history. Some of this you learned about last year with the Holocaust, which was really Hitler trying to exterminate the Jews, believing that they were kind of like a problem with civilization and they needed to be exterminated, which was completely irrational, and Hitler was insane basically for putting this kind of making his whole country kind of follow this belief system. So here's a map of Israel. It's one thing that I would take a look at. So Israel is a country today. You can kind of see there's some things you might have heard of before, like Tel Aviv, which is an important city. There is a section of it called Palestine, and Palestine is an area that Israel, which is mainly Jewish, and Palestine, which is mainly Islamic and Arabic speaking, have really fought over this area. These two, the Palestinians and the Israeli people, have been kind of at war with each other for a number of years. You can see since 1948 there's been really a conflict going on there. So if you hear much about it in the news, it's probably related something to that. So this kind of draws back to what I was saying earlier about the connectedness of these religions. Judaism, Islam, and Christianity all recognize certain people. They recognize Adam as kind of the first human. They recognize Moses and Abraham. All those are central people in all of the religions. Now, the difference is kind of more a view of Messiah, a view of Jesus, especially with Christianity. So we're going to deal with that in kind of the next couple slides here. But these are kind of like some of the central beliefs of what they believe about God. You can kind of look through these. I mean, a lot of them should be kind of fairly straightforward. God's kind of all-powerful. They are a monotheistic religion, believing only in one God. Most of the religions we'll talk about this week are. There are several prophets that are considered, crucial in the understanding of Judaism. This whole idea here of a Messiah, that basically is like a redeemer, someone to save the people. Now, this is kind of interesting because Jesus is thought to be by Christians to be the Messiah, and Jews do not recognize that. They think Jesus was a good person and a prophet, and did really great things, but recognizing him as the Messiah is not something that they would accept. That's one of the main differences between Judaism and Christianity, is that view of Jesus not being the Messiah. The Jews are still waiting on their Messiah to arrive, and there's probably lots of opinions about when that would be, but that's one of the main differences you need to know between Christianity and Judaism. The Torah is their main holy text. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible, of the Christian Bible. So those are books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. You may have heard of those before. We've talked a little bit about how Exodus is the story of Moses, which I've already brought him up. They also have other books that make up, I think it's pronounced the Tanakh, and that is really the rest of the Old Testament of the Christian Bible. So stories of like Daniel in the lion's den or David and Goliath, those stories would all be in there. And those are important too, but maybe not as essential as those first 5 books, where you'd have the 10 Commandments and the whole Exodus and the Passover, which are really important holidays to Jews. So the Torah is written in Hebrew and is the main religious text of Jews. There are several different types of Jewish people. The 3 main types are Orthodox, Conservative, and Reform. And really, just the difference is kind of like Orthodox is the most strict and observant of all Jewish traditions and customs, like dietary restrictions. Pork is not something that Jewish people will eat, especially Orthodox and probably even Conservative. Reformed are, the more you go down from number 2 to number 3, it's just less that they begin to follow. They would all kind of agree on the overall idea of Judaism, but just differences in certain beliefs, certain customs, certain traditions. That's where it's like the dress code, where to pray, when to pray, all those types of things. That's the main difference between these 3 types. These are some things that you're probably familiar with as well. The synagogue, you can see, is like the holy building where they worship. You've probably seen these head coverings before, so that's a part of it. The prayer shawls worn by like the rabbis for sure. It may also be worn by other people in the Jewish faith when they are actually worshiping. They don't wear this all the time. And then there's another instrument made from the ram's horn. So just some things you might have seen before. Some Jewish holidays. This is a good video. I'll upload this as a video, the PowerPoint later on, so you can view the video if you'd like, because you really can't view it here. But this would be something good to watch about a bar mitzvah and a bat mitzvah, which is basically whenever Jewish boys and girls kind of become of age, and like I think they're recognized members of their belief system at that point. Some important holidays here. The most important holiday is Yom Kippur, which is a 24-hour fast and intense prayer. It's called the Day of Atonement. Then there's Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year. Passover is recognizing the Exodus out of Egypt, and the story. Basically, there was in their holy text, there was a angel of death, essentially, that passed over all the Israelites' homes in Egypt, and all their firstborn were spared, whereas all the Egyptians were killed. And this is kind of what ultimately let Pharaoh made the Israelites leave, and kind of gave them freedom from bondage and slavery in Egypt. So they still recognize that Passover. I referred earlier to the communion and Jesus having the Last Supper. That was at Passover when that occurred. So there's that connection there. Hanukkah is probably something you've heard of before. It's Festival of Lights. It's similar to Christmas, and it's really celebrated around the same time of the year. It's actually not as an important of a holiday as you might think. I think our American way of thinking is we think that Hanukkah is more important, but really Yom Kippur and Passover are much more essential holidays. Hanukkah is not nearly as essential of one to note. So that is all the slides. I don't want to take any more time, but definitely feel free to look through the internet and find your own resources. But hopefully this helped fill in some gaps for you.